Joining me now is Dezideriu Gergely, a lawyer and the executive director of the European Roma Rights Centre, which works to stop anti-Romani racism in Europe. Thanks very much for joining us. So how has the community reacted to these high-profile incidents, and particularly the case of little Maria?
Thank you very much for giving me the space to present our position. Definitely there's a lot of concern among Roma communities in Europe because the way this case was placed into the public discussion and was in a way framed raises a number of concerns. First of all, as you just said before, it reproduces and reinforces prejudice which already exists in the society related to the fact that Roma are engaged in a criminal behavior. In a way, this case says Roma are stealing babies. On the other hand, the way the authorities are handling this case also raises concern for Roma that they might be subject to racial profiling. And the problem here is that among the Roma communities, we have a diversity of groups and not all of the Roma are dark-skinned. So what and how would authorities handle this situation? Would authorities enter into all Roma settlements and identify children which don't have the same feature as the parents, and consequently they will have to put in place DNA tests? Also, this case raises concerns in terms of how non-state actors would react. We had some instances, for example, in Serbia, where some far-right groups entered into Roma communities to identify children which don't have the same skin color as their parents. We just saw in Italy a member of the parliament saying that Roma communities should be swept in Italy. And today we saw large police raids in Greece taking place. So in a way there is a concern that now communities are pointed out and as a matter of fact pinpointed as a result of this case.
Right, but how would you respond, and those in the Roma community as well respond, to the fact that in Europe, in Western Europe especially, where you have some of these Roma communities, you have high-level politicians, but also very much ordinary people saying, look, the Roma come, they stay in camps. UNICEF Greece, for instance, says there are instances of criminalization of child trafficking. They don't assimilate, they don't integrate. How do you respond to that, as a Roma yourself, by the way?
Absolutely, there are many statements which we are seeing in the same regard, and sometimes they are coming from high state level officials, which are saying that Roma are not sharing the same values, and therefore there is no place for them in the respective societies. And I think it depends very much on how we are looking into accommodating diversity or imposing our own values. As long as someone doesn't share the same values, that means that he or she doesn't belong to the society. So I think we have to look not only into we have to look at the causes as well, you know, not only on the effects. Speaking about this case, it is extremely important to say that yes, it is something wrong about it, and state authorities need to react. But the responsibility in this case, it's individual, it's not collective. This case puts into discussion an incident which relates to someone's responsibility, not to the responsibility of an entire community. And we have to make this distinction when we talk about this case.
But do you think that authorities and Western Europeans, when they say that Roma communities don't assimilate, that they stay isolated willingly, do you think they have a point? Or are they simply, essentially, stigmatizing and racially profiling an entire community?
In the European Union, both Roma and Roma communities and member states agreed to the fact that the policy which should be put in place in order to address the challenges which the Roma face are social inclusion. Everyone agreed on that, Roma as well and governments as well. The problem is that we have double standards, and we have a double standard discourse, because on one hand governments are speaking about including Roma, about making sure that there's social inclusion. On the other hand, that is not taking place. Of course, there's a lot of efforts needed from the Roma community in itself, because the Roma community also has to overcome its own problems, but there is need for support in that regard.
And what are some of its own problems? I mean, what needs to be done here? If we put up a map, I'm going to put up an interesting map here of the Roma population. And I understand there's diversity there among the Roma. This is not sort of one single block. But in France, 400,000. In Spain, 725,000. The largest Roma community in Turkey, about 2.7 million. What needs to be done there to overcome some of the issues, and in order for these Roma communities to integrate themselves in the wider country where they've essentially established themselves?
You previously just discussed the case in Greece, where there was a description of the living conditions of that Roma communities. Please expand that situation to almost 10 to 12 million Roma living in the EU. The crux of the problem lies in poverty and racism. So there's a need to address both these two issues, but of course this cannot be easily addressed. It's a complex issue, and everyone agrees that in order to address one problem, you have to tackle it from different angles, and that is ensuring that someone, for example, makes sure that his children goes to school, but in the same time to make sure that that family has its means, to provide for the children a space to study, to provide food in order to go to school, clothing to go to school, to have an income, not to rely on something which is informal but rather formal.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us on this. Dezideriu Gergely.